Paul Lloyd Hemphill is going to speak to us tonight. He was drafted into the United States Army. I wanted to say Navy, since I'm an old Navy man. He was served in Vietnam. He, after his military service, he went into broadcast sales, and he became a successful marketing specialist, helping teenagers get into their first choice colleges.
Legally.
He has written many books, and he has designed a new teaching model for how Wellesley, for how American history can be taught in our schools. Instead of the textbooks approach to history, the author sees the future, the author I assume being you, sees the future of teaching history as a video-oriented and storytelling format that generates useful life lessons to inspire our youth to become better persons and better citizens. So please welcome Paul Hemphill.
Thank you very much for that generous introduction. Well spoken.
You do. Good to see you.
Thank you. Our national security right now is at risk because of two major threats. The first one is intentional, and the second one is unintentional. The intentional threat comes from China. The unintentional threat comes from your local high school and 36,000 other high schools throughout the United States. In the next few minutes, I'm going to tell you why, what the remedy is, and then you will want to see that remedy placed in one of your local high schools. If you were to ask a bunch of teenagers what they thought about learning history, the answer is predictable. Oh, it's boring. That response has nothing to do with the teacher. It has everything to do with the nature of the subject. Teenagers do not see history as relevant to their lives because they can't relate to it. They've never participated in or were involved in any historical event that they're required to study or learn for the next quiz. Any event that would give them at least an emotional or intellectual connection. But because there's a total disconnection from history, it has led to a national epidemic of history illiteracy that threatens our security. Now, the claim I just made is substantiated by two national education studies that came to three very disturbing conclusions. The first one is that 88% of all high school seniors have no proficiency in American history, which means they don't know what to do with the information they studied for the last quiz, thereby rendering that information meaningless. Number two, 82% of all colleges in this country do not require any student to take a single course in American history as a requirement for graduation. And the third problem is that as part of a national trend that's been going on for the last 10 years, nearly 1,000 of our colleges and universities no longer require its history majors to take a single course in American history, including one university in our nation's capital by the name of, are you ready for this? George Washington University. Those three facts suggest that the teaching of American history is now and continues to be tomorrow morning a national security issue because it begs the question. If you don't know what your country stands for, how are you going to stand up to our enemies, both foreign and domestic? You cannot defend what you cannot define. Which brings me to that famous statement that we've all heard so many times before. Those who don't remember the past are condemned to repeat it. Well, what has man learned from studying the past? He has learned that he will continue to make the same mistakes of the past again and again. As human beings, we continue to make war on each other. We continue to watch the fall of corrupt governments and politicians. And to this day, we still deny the existence of slavery. We just call it by another name, human trafficking. So if history is going to continue to be taught in the same manner that it's been taught all along, delivering the same disastrous results that we get year after year, that keeps future generations in ignorance of what our country stands for, thereby putting us more in jeopardy, then doesn't it stand to reason that if we want to change the direction of our history and its teaching, and the results, that we ought to change the way we teach American history? Is this making any sense so far?
Yeah.
Okay. Here's my solution. That we need to teach American history selfishly in order for our students to learn their history for personal benefit and personal growth. That we approach history with the same self-centered question that every teenager subconsciously is asking before they walk into every history class. What's in it for me if I learn this stuff? And I challenge everybody in this room to drive to your local high school tomorrow morning, walk into the building and ask to read the introduction to any American history book, whether it's on digital or in a regular textbook, and see if you can find the answer to that teenager's question in the introduction. You won't. But you will find it in my program, which I designed 3 years ago and have tested it with adults for the past 3 years. A program that I'm going to illustrate for you in a few minutes. A program that teaches our kids what they can achieve and accomplish with their lives with the help of American history. And then with the hope that my program is going to go national so that every history teacher in this country can take my program and accomplish 2 results. 1, to add to the security of this nation, one high school at a time. And 2, to help our kids in their personal growth process. Now, our public education system, critics would say, is defined this way. Tomorrow morning, your kids are going to walk into a classroom culture that is not one of stimulating thinking and free expression. No, it's one of compliance, conformity, and standardization. We are going to teach you this, and you are going to learn this. And part of that process is forcing our teachers to administer too many standardized tests in math and science, but not in history, which led one educator in Springfield to say in a YouTube video, if it's not tested, it's because it's not valued. So how do you find value in history? I discovered that the answer has been hidden in plain sight for years. It's hidden in stories that come from historical events. Here's a story for you. During the famous 1863 Battle of Gettysburg, a young woman was traumatized by witnessing the bloody and amputated legs and arms of young soldiers who had been wounded in that battle just hours earlier. And with nothing more than a cup of water, she tended to the needs of these men, and not knowing what to say to relieve their pain and suffering, all she could do was exercise the most fundamental, most important element of human communication, which is what all of you are doing right now. Listening. And unbeknownst to her, she was able to exercise the best form of leadership. Because those men who survived, she was able to lead them across what I call an emotional bridge of hope over which few of us could cross alone. And she did it with what little she had available. The act of listening and a cup of water. And at the time of the battle, this young woman was only 15 years old. 2 lessons that we can take from that story. Number 1, even a child can save a life. And number 2, our human nature allows us to accomplish positive results with what little we have in a given moment. As a marketing specialist, paid by advertisers to make you buy products and services you've never heard of before, when I came across this story years ago in researching my book, I knew that I could sell and market history to teenagers if I could present it in story form, and then from those stories extract useful life lessons that those students could use immediately after they are exposed to those lessons. So, you take a story like The Girl from Gettysburg, and lots of other stories that are in my book, and you bring that into a classroom. Those teenagers would discover for the very first time in their lives, not in a psychology class with theory, but in an American history class, that their lives have meaning and relevance right now because they just witnessed proof that they too can keep hope alive where there is none. That they too, at their tender age, can save a life. And at their tender age, when they think they really don't have much to offer, Psychology Today magazine says that more than 70% of all teenage girls in this country suffer from what is known as low self-esteem. And parents are helpless to do anything about it. But I see my program as acting as an emotional steroid that acts as a boosting mechanism to increase that positive self-esteem in our students. A result you will not get from a textbook, but you will get from my program, because it centers on what a student is capable of doing for their personal growth. Now, why stories? Stories connect to our emotions, and we remember facts better when we are emotionally connected to them. And a neuroscientist out at the University of Southern California by the name of Antonio Damasio reminds us that emotions are not the opposite of reason. In fact, they are essential to reason. They assign value to things. They tell us what to pay attention to, what to care about, and what to remember. And neuroscientists will also tell us that to remember things has a lot to do with a little chemical in our brain known as dopamine. So to increase dopamine so that students remember facts better requires that the teacher teach information in a whole new way. Psst, American history in a whole new way. Just as my program teaches American history in a whole new way. Excuse me. So what my program does, it's dopamine producing, it's emotionally connecting, and it's personally rewarding. The reward comes when a student watches just one of my 50 videos and discovers a tactic that is used by a general during the Battle of Gettysburg that helps her increase her chances of getting in to the college of her choice. Well, I'd like to see that video. Or a student can watch one of my 50 videos and discover that enthusiasm is far more important than a college degree when it comes to accomplishing your goals. Or a student can discover the value of stress in their lives that reveals qualities that you have when you watch a video on what Sarah Broadhead went through when she went through a lot of stress in 3 days during the battle. This is learning history selfishly for personal growth. When I was researching how teenagers like to learn, I discovered that their preferred information vehicle over any other source of information is video. I could announce to a bunch of students that in 5 minutes I'm going to run a 3-minute video on how to watch paint dry, and they'll all show up. Being simplistic, yes I am. So anyway, and I knew that even though I had written a bestseller that the parents are buying in droves and writing reviews on Amazon, I thought, gee, didn't they buy the book for the kids? They're writing the reviews. Anyway, I thought I had to be where the kids are in front of a screen or on a screen. So I converted the book to video. And the formula I use to reach the kids is very simple. Use video, tell a story, keep it short because attention spans are short, and reveal a lesson. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you a sample video from the 50 videos that I have. Frank Haskell. Once a school superintendent and a town clerk, his administrative expertise qualified him as General Gibbon's primary assistant. No manual on military tactics ever stated that an officer should use his sword as a motivational tool. On horseback, he took creative measures to ensure that his fellow soldiers would not lose their position or their perspective. Seeing the ground giving way to the Confederates, he saw what appeared to be a mass retreat of Union soldiers not under his command. Recognizing the significance of the Union position and the desperation of the moment, he did not seek permission to act. General Hancock was highly complimentary of Haskell's moves.
At a critical point of the battle, when the contending forces were 50 or 60 yards apart, believing that an example was necessary and ready to sacrifice his life, Frank Haskell rode between the contending lines with the view of giving encouragement to our forces.
Encouragement came in doses of blunt persuasion. To the many frightened men who appeared to be running away, he screamed at them to turn around, hold their ground, and fire back. With an attractive flair for eloquent subtlety, he added,
"On some unpatriotic backs of those not quick of comprehension, the flat of my saber fell not lightly, and at its touch their love of country returned."
By his words, he had a kinder, gentler approach to command. By his actions, he did whatever was necessary to get the job done. The moment was history's cue to demonstrate that the sword was mightier than the oral command. Perhaps accurately, his own commander concluded that Haskell was a young man on my staff who did more than any other one man to repulse Pickett's assault at Gettysburg. History's design for Haskell was to be at the right place at precisely the right time. Innovate. Some problems defy ordinary textbook solutions. Under pressure, you have the ability to think of solutions that challenge the standard, demonstrating that innovation can do more to influence your progress than traditional formulas for problem solving. Haskell saw something that did not look right and influenced the outcome. He did not have to ask anyone what to do. Necessity forced him to invent measures to accomplish the task at hand. Do it yourself. Without being asked, take the initiative as Haskell did. Do not wait for someone else to solve pressing problems. Plus, greater self-esteem follows accomplishment. Take on a project you are not expected to handle, any project. It can be helping a coworker, washing your mother's kitchen floor, making an unscheduled delivery, even cleaning your room. Do anything that does not fall into your daily routine. It will influence you to look at things with a different and fresh perspective. Surprise yourself with creative solutions you discover by yourself. A teacher in Minneapolis, what she does is that she stops each video at the point where the story ends. And then she tells her students, I want you to break up in groups of 4, and in 15 minutes come back and you tell me what you think is the lesson you learned from what you just watched. She said that instead of teaching my kids American history from a textbook on facts that they have to learn that they'll forget after the next quiz, her words, instead, I force them to use their imaginations, their thinking caps. so that they can figure out what is relevant and meaningful to them. So as our students become more exposed to more stories, they will become emotionally connected to the events that produce those stories. And the more events they become exposed to, over time they'll come to learn what our country stands for, so they can stand up to our enemies, both foreign and domestic. So in essence, this is what I am saying. We need to have history presented in a way that answers that student's question, what's in it for me? So they can use whatever they see on video, and they can say, wow, I didn't know I could do that. I didn't know I could be, from this video, self-reliant. I thought I had to depend on everybody all the time. Now I know what I am capable of doing. Presenting history in a video format that generates life lessons that our students can use to inspire themselves to be better persons, empower themselves, get their self-esteem up, and become better citizens as a result. To conclude my talk, I'd like to read to you a statement that was made about 150 years ago that I believe validates the reason why I'm standing before you this evening. And it goes like this: it is not, can any of us imagine better, but can we all do better? The dogmas of the quiet past are inadequate. I like to say the way we've been teaching history in the past and the present are inadequate. To the stormy present, the occasion is piled high with difficulty, and we must rise with the occasion. As our case is new, so we must think anew and act anew, and then we shall save our country. Abraham Lincoln. Thank you very much. Now I'll take some questions. Yes?
Would you include civics in that?
You can, that's a separate thing. Yes, I definitely would do that.
I think definitely that there's a big issue in not teaching civics.
No question. In fact, what's really has amazed me all these months that I've been delivering these talks, that's the first time I've heard that question. And I was always hoping that question would come up. And this is the first time. So, Richard Dreyfuss was really big on civics. He was making all kinds of television appearances. And I thought there was a guy that I was going to be able to work with, until he was one of those actors that was accused 30 years ago of doing something with some girl in a back room that he shouldn't have been doing. So you don't see him on TV anymore. I've tried to reach him. I can't reach him. Any other questions? Yes.
I don't want to get into any political thing here, but this move towards socialism, I mean, to me, is that part of, when we don't teach history, that's a result of that? Is that a logical conclusion?
I would guess so, yes, and I don't get into politics either. I'm just saying that if we can get, I guess the better way of putting this is, your being here this evening is the equivalent of my having invited you all over to my house for dinner. You all showed up. And the reason why you all showed up is because I fed you an appetizer that you thought, wow, if it's this good, the meal must be good, so I'm showing up at this guy's house. Right? In this food metaphor, the appetizer is the Battle of Gettysburg. And the meal is American history. So I would want the function of this video series in a school would to get the kids to figure out for themselves, and then it will dawn on them that, gee, if I can learn this and get this much out of this one event in American history, this battle that took place in some place called Pennsylvania, what more could I gain out of learning more stories about more events in American history? Man, this stuff has got to be cool. That's the conclusion I want these kids to come to when they're exposed to these stories that they can relate to. Because right now, there's no relating to history. It's a boring subject. Don't want to study it if they had their choice. And it's hurting us in more ways than one. Yes?
I would submit that not just American history, but all subjects taught in our schools are boring. Our students graduate they can't make change. They can't read a bus schedule. They can't point out Texas on a map. They don't know what the qualifications are for vice president. And according to a survey by USA Today, 41% of all high school students in this country graduate with an A average.
Yeah, it's called grade inflation.
But the whole
Yeah,
it's not
it's
just
a system. It's
not
a
just
system.
this issue. The entire system is
Yeah.
bankrupt.
I agree. Because when I talked about dopamine levels as increasing, you know, it's not just for getting kids hooked on history, but hooked on other subjects as well. How about presenting math with video and stories? I mean, that would be fascinating if you can get teachers, if you can let them loose and get away from this Common Core requirements that change them to a desk so that they could be creative. They would love to be unleashed into their own creativity, because what could happen is this. I would see this series as history teachers watching this and gaining a lot for themselves. They could say, gee, you know, I got to teach a World War II course. Gee, instead of having a textbook, I'm going to assign 2 books to every student to look up stories in those books, come back and discuss what those stories that they read and what lessons they learned, and then we'll go to the media department and work on creating videos for our history class. So it's all hands-on. And these kids can be proud of the work that they did and what they learned about World War II. What's wrong with that approach? It's just really engaging. It's very creative, and guess what? It is so simple it's maddening. Right? Does that make any sense? Now, you never learned history that way, did you?
No, but I do recall the moments when I was most engaged with material were the moments that I remember best.
Right.
I have a question. Are these videos, or some of them, samples of them on YouTube or anything?
Well, you can go to my website, which is gettysburglessons.com. And at the toolbar, you'll see the word schools. You punch that in. And on that page, you'll see a couple of samples of videos that work. One of the more engaging examples is a video of that 15-year-old girl that I talked to you about. That's about almost 6 minutes long. But I have played that video when I've had time in some groups. And when the story ends by saying, at the time of this event, this young woman was only 15 years old. You could see the jaws drop. I mean, it's fun to watch. People go, wow. And I've been in classrooms where I've read from my book. Didn't show the video. I read from the book. I knew how the story was going to end. And I'd look up and I'd say, and this woman was only 15 years old. And the students just go, wow, you mean I have that ability too? And this is what they don't know. This is what they don't learn in history or any course. So it's really a way of empowering our students to think much more of themselves that will raise their self-esteem so that they can go out into the world and start companies because they know they've got the ability to do it. They just have to find the right sources to do it with. So,
How do you market your materials?
I'm just starting. It's a great question. I just left an 18-year career where I helped students get into colleges. And somebody who was following me on my Facebook page called me one day from New Hampshire. He has a national office in Washington, D.C. He says, I want you to come down, and I want my group of people to meet you and talk about your... He said, we'll put you up at the Trump Hotel, we'll take care of all your expenses, da-da-da-da-da. So I get down there. I find out that all these people are personal, private, national security experts. A couple of them have the White House as their source, or clients. And so I basically asked them, why am I here? And so they said, well, we want to make sure this country survives and thrives and doesn't go the route of whatever, okay? What we noticed, what we liked about your program was that it deals with the future of this country, not just the present. We're dealing with the present. and all of us around this table are dealing with the present, national security. But you deal with what is important for the future, and we want to support you on that. So I have a guy who is the nation's leading expert in cybersecurity, who is fully supporting, he's the head of this group, fully supporting everything that I do. So it's my getting out to groups like the Rotary clubs, most of whom do a lot of work with the local high schools, and I say to them, if you think you'd like to get this program into your local high school, just let me know and we can have a talk about it.
Can high schools just accept this, or do they have to go some sort of...
Oh, great question. I had a guy, just a retired history teacher from Los Angeles, called me. He says, I'd like to meet you. I'm going to fly from Los Angeles to Boston to meet you. I said, well, we can do this on the phone. You don't have to fly here. He says, no, I have a sister who lives in Medfield. And not too, okay, fine. So he gets here and he says, you are never going to change the way American history is taught in our schools just by the way you talk about it. Principals won't have anything to do with it. He says, I know how to get your program into the schools. Yeah, tell me, how? He said, you sell it as a course elective. In other words, if a student can have the choice between art, creative writing, ceramics, and personal development, you don't sell it as a history course. You sell it as now my teacher in Minneapolis, she uses it as a character development course. My guy in Los Angeles uses it as a leadership course. And I have a fellow in North Carolina, he uses it as a personal development course. So, yeah. In other words, we don't tell the kids this is history.
You don't tell the teachers it's history.
Yeah, okay. But it's history. But to me, it's history by subterfuge. You know, it's when I said to my kids one day, if I wrote a history book, would you read it? They said, oh God, Dad, you're crazy. Of course we wouldn't read it. It's history. Why would you waste your time doing that? I said, okay, I got it. What if I wrote a book that taught you how to be successful with your life? Would you read that? Yeah, we'd read that. Yeah, don't you think so, John? Yeah, sure, we'd read that. So when the book finally came out, I handed them each a copy. And of course, the title didn't have, the original title was Why You're Already a Leader. Okay. So one of my boys picks it up and he starts reading it. I said, no, don't start at the beginning. Just open it up anywhere. That's the way it's designed to work. And so, excuse me. So what had happened was, he opens it up, and he says, gee, Dad, there's some history in this. I said, so does that bother you? No, this is kind of cool. I wasn't selling a lot of copies of that book, only to management types. So I got a phone call 2 years ago from a guy in Pittsburgh, never heard of him. He says, I've been following you on the Facebook, but I have 2 teenage girls who have read your book, they absolutely love it, and they think that your title really sucks. Okay? And I said, really? I said, so what do they suggest? And they said, well, I'll get back to you. I said, okay, fine. He calls me the following day. He says, here's their suggestion. They think this will work. And that's what I went with. I got to tell you, when I changed the title, the book became a bestseller on Amazon. Okay, basically flying off the shelf. I mean, now when I sit down at a book signing, I'll have people walk over to the book and say, I have to get this book. Now you don't ask them, well, why do you want to get this book? No, you want to sell it to them. But the title is intriguing enough that makes people. This one couple came up to me and said, she was very well dressed, and I said, why are you purchasing the book? She says, well, my husband and I both work, we're both very successful, and we don't have any time for our kids. So maybe this will help. I almost impulsively said, why don't you quit your job and raise your kids so you don't have to get the book? So anyway, I can be a wise guy once in a while. But just so you know, every once in a while I am asked, how do I get the book? Oftentimes I'll do a book signing after an event, so if you want to purchase the book for $15, you can do that. I'll sign it with an inscription inside of it so that anybody who reads the inscription will want to say, gee, I want to sample the appetizer too. So it makes for a good Christmas gift. Christmas is next week. So it's... so anyway, are there any more questions?
What other books have you written?
I've written Gettysburg Lessons, which is an adaptation of this. I've written 2 books on college, how to get into college and how to pay for it. One is called Planning for College. The other one is How to Beat the College is Their Own Game or something like that. I wrote it so long ago. So I've had 5 books come out. But now I'm concentrating on inspiration for teens and for, this is another interesting thing. I had an Air Force colonel who wrote a fabulous review of my book. And the last thing he said in the review was, I bought this for my daughter, but I started reading it, and I'm going to make it mandatory reading for all my junior and senior officers. Really? You know? But he's basically telling me you miss it's the wrong title. You should say Inspiration for Teens and Adults. But that was just coming back to me. So I'm having fun with this, is what I'm saying. Any other questions?
What's your website again?
GettysburgLessons.com. And if you want to, I'll give you my card. And if you know of any other organizations that would like to have a guest speaker, I would love to show up and listen to myself talk.
I'm just sorry we didn't have much more of our membership here tonight. That was very interesting.
Yeah.
It was very, very interesting.
Well, thank you. Thank you. The video will help. And if you can, when you get a copy of the video, if you could send that video to educators that you might know, that would really be a help, because it's going to get the foot in the door on the program. So.
And the book's on Amazon?
The book's on Amazon. Now, if you go to my website, I should have told you this before. If you go to my website, you can click on books, and you're able to get the book for $9.95, and I pay for the shipping and handling. So all you pay is $9.95.
Okay.
So do it that way.
I have 2 grandchildren in Oregon. I'll
Oh,
do it that
cool.
way, so.
Okay, great. So if you want to order 10 copies, I'm very amenable to that. So thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate it.
All right, with that, we close the meeting
I
and
have to run. I
appreciate
have a rehearsal.
everybody's attendance tonight.
I know, but I didn't want to interrupt you.
No.
No, and it was very interesting.
That's it already?
It was so
Yeah,
rejuvenating.
same here.
Now,
Thank
these
you.
are West Virginia.
I know you said C.
Yes.